Validation, or talking to other franchise owners, is one of the most important steps to your due diligence process in a franchise investigation. In this video, I want to share my top 6 validation questions. One of the most common mistakes that candidates make with validation is taking what one person says to them as Bible truth. This is that franchise owner's truth, but it's not always the truth. When you're validating a concept, it's really important that you talk to as many people as you can, maybe 4 to 8 franchise owners, and you're looking for the commonality among everything that you're hearing. In a strong franchise system, there will be consistency among the validation, especially if you're talking to the top performing franchise owners, which the Daily Coach would really encourage you to do. The reason I say that is the top performing people have what you want. They've mastered the model to this point in its history. Many times candidates will say, yeah, but I want to talk to the people who are failing, the people who it isn't working out for. And I say, why? Do you want to fail? Do you want it not to work out for you? Don't you think that the people who don't have it all figured out wish that they did have it all figured out? And if they did have it all figured out, they wouldn't be where they are today? When you get to the top performing people in a franchise, especially if these people have replicated their result year over year over year, they will have a science to what they do, a science that they can share with you. The top performing people know with clarity what drives top performance in their business. Therefore, they will equally know why people in their business won't be successful, but they'll know it factually, not emotionally. And that's the big difference. When I'm validating a concept, I like to compare the top performing group to the average performing group. So I want to try to figure out what is the difference between good and great in a franchise system. Validation is a really fun step in the due diligence of a franchise, and I want you to learn as much as you can from these franchisees. But what I don't want is for one franchise owner to clip your sales or to limit your beliefs about what is possible. So let's talk about my top questions that I like to ask franchise owners. Before you start asking franchisees about their numbers, that is an important part of validation, but it's not the most important part. And before we can ask questions about their financial result, wouldn't it be important to sort of have context about who it is that you're talking to, why they chose that business, what their background, what their skills were coming into the business? So the first question I want to ask an owner is, what did you do before selecting this business? By knowing what they did in their previous life, if they were an investor or if they were a leader in corporate America or if they drove sales in their past job, then you're going to understand their potential attraction to this business. You're also going to understand their potential learning curve. If you're talking to someone who is more of an individual contributor in a company, who had never built a team or been driving a sales pipeline, and they're now running their own business, their learning curve could be bigger than someone who had those responsibilities in their W-2 job. Their starting place is not good or bad, it just could impact how they validate their success in a business. The second question I like to ask after understanding what they did prior to owning the franchise is, why did you select this business? If the franchisee that you're talking to went out and validated all of the competition and ended up with this business, that could be amazing validation for you. It could save you so much time in feeling the need to go look at all of the competitors, especially if you've already done some of that competitive validation and you are leaning into this brand, and then you meet people who also did that validation and they ended up selecting this brand. You'll find that alignment that I want you to feel by talking to other franchise owners. Then the next question I want you to ask is, knowing what you know now, would you do this again? Why or why not? I mean, boom, that is the question. After that, you can drop the mic and shut up, because what they say to you next could be all that you need to hear. If a franchisee feels well supported and knowing what they know now, oh yeah, they would do it again. And in fact, they're building their second store. They're planning for their third store. That's amazing validation for you. If the franchisee says, knowing what they know now, they're not sure they would do it again, it doesn't mean it's not the business for you, but wouldn't it be kind of fun to know why they might not want to do it again? But again, the tendency when you start to hear negative validation from one or two people is to generalize and say, well, everybody feels that way. And I can almost guarantee, at least in the world that I live in here at FranChoice, that absolutely will not be the case. If it was, I wouldn't be bringing you this franchise. If you're out there looking at a franchise on your own, that might be the case, but you might have to do more validation in order to really be confident that everybody feels the same way. The idea is not to make a gross generalization from what one person says and then say that everybody feels the same way. It's one person's opinion. The fourth question I would ask an owner is, what has been your biggest aha moment? Now, the answer to this question may very well go back to why they selected the franchise or what their experience was prior to coming in. If the franchisee had a huge learning curve in terms of learning the role that an owner in that particular business has to play, for sure, that's probably going to be their biggest aha moment, right? If the franchise owner did not work with a consultant and maybe didn't do proper and thorough due diligence, their biggest aha moment may be because they came in with improper expectations. So again, what they say does not have to be your truth. It is their truth based on what they brought into this business from their previous life and the expectations that they started with. So the idea is that in working with an experienced franchise consultant who can make sure that your expectations are in the right place, who can also ensure that you are taking all of the steps necessary to complete thorough due diligence, that when you do say yes, you can feel confident in that final yes. Question number 5 is, do you feel well trained and supported? Now again, the answer to this question may also trickle back to question number 1 and question 2, just based on the experience, the expectation, the skills they had prior to coming to this business. But additionally, it's really important to know how well trained and supported they feel, because most franchise owners do not have industry experience or even knowledge of how to run a particular type of franchise business before they say yes. So in most cases, what they see here will be very applicable to you. But let's say that they feel they haven't been well trained or supported. You could then ask follow-up questions with regard to how much the training has improved or increased in the years that they've been involved in the franchise. Because remember, every franchise business has to grow and adapt. Otherwise, it's going to die on the vine. It's a business. It has to be growing and changing. And so we can't fault a franchisor that 5 years ago was a startup franchise and they didn't necessarily know how to properly train their franchisees. But those franchisees coming in at that moment had to know that they were pioneers and that there was going to be a rougher path to follow than the people that would come in the future. So we can't go back too far and judge what the franchisor did 3 or 4 years ago to what they're doing today. What's most important is, have they improved? Have they shown that they genuinely care about their franchisees, that they're always coming up with new ways, trying to deliver the product or the service more efficiently, more effectively, that they're staying on the cutting edge to the competition, that they're growing the widget so that it remains relevant to the marketplace. That's what's most important in this due diligence process, more so than the one franchisee's opinion of whether they themselves feel adequately trained and supported. And question number 6 is a doozy. If you could go back and do it all over again, what would you do differently? Hindsight is 2020. Knowing what they know now, if they could go back with the knowledge they have now and start all over again, what would they do differently? That is amazing advice for you. And in fact, it's the question that every franchisor would want you to ask, because the goal of every strong franchisor is to graduate the next class with a little bit more information, getting those franchisees out of the gate faster, ramping up faster, getting to profitability faster. That is going to be the evolution of the brand, that momentum that's created with each graduating class. So if you can get their hindsight and not make the mistakes that they made, that is golden advice to you. After you've asked these 6 questions, you absolutely can go into their earnings potential. There are other videos on Kim Daly TV that talk about how to validate the earnings potential of a franchise using what I call the daily plan. But I understand that you'll want to validate the earnings potential against the expenses of that specific franchise owner. I'm not a huge fan of asking an owner how much are they making or what is their net, because what an owner nets is going to vary based on, are they taking a salary out of the business? Do they have a loan against the business? There are many franchise owners that are using their franchise to defer taxes from a big W-2 job. Therefore, they don't want to show a big return. So by asking an owner what they're netting, I don't know that you're actually going to get the answer that you think you're getting. And that's the danger of asking that particular question. If you follow the 4 questions that I spell out in the daily plan, we'll put a link to that video in the description below, then you're going to understand where the gas pedal is in that business and how to drive maximum revenue, which ultimately is what you should be trying to validate. What is the revenue that one unit of this franchise can produce? But that revenue number is going to vary based on the goals of that franchise owner that you're talking to and how hard they've decided to drive that gas pedal. I know this to be true because for 8 years, I was an average performing consultant in my franchise. And then I got clear about where that gas pedal was, and 1 year later, I was a history maker. So I was an average performing consultant for 8 years, and then I was a way above average performing consultant. I was the same me. Franchoice was the same process, but I had created 2 completely different results. When I did that, it changed on how I coach on validation. And the most important thing I want you to hear me say in this entire video is, I do not want you to walk away with any limiting belief about what's possible based on what one franchisee is making, or more importantly, is not making. It is their opportunity to make or break. Your fate does not have to be theirs. If you find people that tell you the story that you want to hear, saddle up next to them, because those should be the people that you're trying to role model. If you're validating in a system that seems to have systemically bad validation, I would pause and maybe move on to another brand. But for sure, if you came to the idea of this franchise through the Daily Coach, you are not finding systemically bad validation. If you are ready to begin your own franchise investigation, working with some of the top franchisors in the country that won't have systemically bad validation, I would love to be your daily coach. Please leave a comment below or reach directly out to the Daily Coach. Because I'm pushing out so much content, I want you to see all of it. Please like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell to receive notification of every new video.